Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. You're with me, Arun Sharma, and today I'm talking again. This is the part of the Read and Learn series. I hope you're enjoying this series. I've already done 3-4 episodes in February, so this is the next one. And do have a look. It's part of the playlist on which this video is also part of it. So do have a look at the previous ones. The objective of the series is to improve your ability to read, understand, at the same time inform you about various things that's happening around in the world, make my viewer more informed is the objective. So today we are going to talk about Made in China. So Made in China is something that we have all talked about. We've all talked about all the time that right for the last 20-25 years of our lives, Made in China has been a major theme in our lives. Whether you talk about electronics, whether you talk about low-end goods to high-end goods, everything that you see in our markets has been made in China, and that's happened because of the fact that China in the late 80s and over the last 3-4 decades actually strategically created a competitive advantage over various other countries and over various other regions in terms of building a huge manufacturing base. It used this huge demographic dividend of having a huge population. I mean, of course, China was the most populous country. Now India is close to overtaking it and has overtaken it also in the last few months, as we know. So, but late 80s, early 90s, early 2000s, China was the biggest population in the world, and not just that, they had a very positive atmosphere for international companies to come and manufacture. So manufacturing became a huge base of China, and China's economy actually grew on that basis. So the article that I'm talking about, that I'm reading today, is actually from The Economist again, one of my favorite newspapers or magazines, whatever you call them. And this article explores, talks about this background that I've been talking about, but explores what it's calling Alt Asia, the alternative in Asia that's getting generated, which is going to compete with China in order to woo manufacturing firms across the world. And of course, the geopolitics of it is that you know that America and China have been at loggerheads with respect to, there's a huge suspicion going around between the two countries. America thinks that China will become the next superpower, and hence, and China also has ambitions to become a superpower. And you know the kind of politics and military maneuvers that keep happening. And of course, China has issues with India, and India has had issues with China across the borders, and you hear about those skirmishes. So in that context, knowing about this, I selected this article because knowing about this will be important for all of you in terms of what is the greatest strategic aspect. And when Modi ji talks about Make in India, where is he coming from? What is he actually looking at? Although the Make in India is not discussed much in this article, but this is something which is very important for all of you. So let's have a look at this article. The article starts with, the topic is global firms are eyeing Asian alternatives to Chinese manufacturing. So global firms are eyeing Asian alternatives to Chinese manufacturing. So this is the article, and I'm going to read a few paragraphs. I'm not reading the whole thing, but I'm going to read a few paragraphs which will give you the key of this article. So it starts with the background. In 1987, Panasonic made an adventurous bet on China. At the time, the electronics giant's home country, Japan, was a global manufacturing powerhouse, and the Chinese economy was no larger than Canada's. So we are talking about 1987. Panasonic, which is a Japanese company, they made a very adventurous bet on China, and China was a small economy at that time, no larger than Canada's. And so when the company entered a Chinese joint venture to make a cathode ray tubes, CRTs, for its televisions in Beijing, eyebrows were raised. Before long, other titans of consumer electronics from Japan and elsewhere were also piling into China to take advantage of its abundant and cheap labor. So what China played on was the huge abundance of labor, specifically the cheap labor, to attract even companies from Japan like Panasonic, and not just Japanese companies, but companies from across the world. They kind of started making a beeline towards China in order to manufacture there. And it started with the example starts with the 1987 shift of Panasonic to make CRTs, cathode ray tubes, for its televisions in Beijing. It went through a joint venture there. 3.5 decades on, China is the linchpin of the multi-billion. Linchpin means the key element. It's the most important element. Linchpin of a team is the most important player. So China, 3.5 decades on, China is the linchpin of the multi-million dollar consumer electronics industry. So the multi-trillion dollar consumer electronics industry, its exports of electronic goods and components amounted to $1 trillion in 2021 out of a global total of 3.3 trillion. So this is information for you. The consumer electronics industry globally is $3.3 trillion according to this article, out of which $1 trillion of exports goes from China. So you can see more than its fair share of this thing. And of course, the Chinese economy's growth, this is just one example of the consumer electronics industry. I am quite sure, and you can actually look at it. There are so many other industries which would have set up manufacturing base. The consumer electronics is just one of them that happened, and that's the basis of the huge exponential growth that China had for its economy. Increasingly, however, now the change of tack. So यहाँ पे they have talked about how China has grown, the first paragraph, in the past 3.5 decades, and it's given an example. Increasingly, however, under a weighty combination of commercial and political pressure. So two kinds of pressure, commercial as well as political pressure. Politics we talked about, specifically politics with America, and even European countries. A lot of European countries look at China with a lot of concern, what they are up to, etc. And foreign companies are beginning to pluck up the courage, if not to leave China entirely, then at least to look beyond it for growth. So Chinese labor is no longer that cheap. And the key element, so the key element talked about in the first paragraph was the cheap Chinese labor. Now the Chinese labor is no longer that cheap, right? Between 2013 and 22, manufacturing wages doubled to an average of $8.27 per hour. Right? Contrast this with, as the article goes ahead and tells us, that the other alternative Asian economies which are going to compete with China for the manufacturing pie, there the average wage rate is around $3 per hour, which means that the crucial competitive advantage that China had of cheap labor in the 1980s, which it leveraged to get the manufacturing going inside it, is now no longer true. It's more than doubled in the last 10 years. Doubling in 10 years, mathematically, if you know, it's close to 7% growth rate per year on wages, which is very high if you look at compared with global numbers. More important, the deepening techno decoupling between Beijing and Washington. That means Chinese capital and the US capital, American capital. The deepening techno decoupling. So what do they mean by that? There is mutual suspicion between the two countries, and that has led to technologically decoupling each other. So America is saying that we don't want to be strategically dependent on China for all our electronics and chip imports, etc. So that's something that America is very concerned about. So this decoupling, the deepening techno decoupling between Beijing and Washington, is forcing manufacturers of high-tech products, especially those involving advanced semiconductors, to reconsider their reliance on China. So basically, the drive to move out of China is not just economics driven; it's also politics driven, is what this article or this paragraph is telling us. So now this third passage, as you see, you should recognize by this time that this author is essentially giving you, every paragraph the author is is kind of shifting the emphasis a little bit from one aspect of what he's trying to say to another. So between 2020 and 22, the number of Japanese companies operating in China fell from 13,600 to 12,700. So you might be asked a question, comprehension wise, why is he trying to say this? So this is basically, when he's giving you this information, he's basically strengthening his point when he's talking about the decoupling, when he's talking about people looking at alternatives, companies and corporations looking at alternatives to China. So this is an example of that. So why has the author used the example of Japanese companies, number of Japanese companies operating in China falling from 13,600 to 12,700? Answer: he's used that, he's given that example in order to reinforce his point that companies across the world are trying to look at alternatives outside China. According to Teco Data Bank, whatever, you don't need to read this part. On January 29, it was reported that Sony plans to move production of cameras sold in Japan and the West from China to Thailand. Samsung, a South Korean firm, has slashed its Chinese workforce by more than 2/3 since a peak in 2013. Dell, an American computer maker, is reportedly aiming to stop using Chinese-made chips by 2024. So if you see this, what he's done, he's taken you across the world. He's taken you to Japan, he's taken you to South Korea, he's taken you to American computer maker, he's taken you to Sony, again Japanese. So he's talked about this not just being an American phenomena, but it's actually a phenomena that is actually pervasive of the entire world. So that's what he is talking about here. And the next paragraphs, obviously, is going to change or move on with his idea. The question for Dell. Samsung, Sony and their peers is where to make stuff instead. So if I'm moving out of China, I've been making stuff in China for the last 30 odd years, 3 odd decades. Where do I go? So where do I take myself? Where do I take my manufacturing? Where do I take my growth plans? No single country offers China's vast manufacturing base, yet taken together, and this is where he's coming in with his point, yet taken together, a patchwork of economies across Asia presents a formidable alternative. So he's talking about a group of countries across Asia. The article is talking about a group of countries across Asia which taken together is a formidable alternative to what China is in the eyes of these companies. It stretches in a crescent from Hokkaido in northern Japan through South Korea. I think I'll skip this paragraph and just show you a picture speaks 1,000 words. And these are the countries, and he starts calling them the Alt Asia countries. So all the blue countries: India, Bangladesh, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Brunei, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Philippines, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan. So it's around 10-12 countries that are in the same region, more or less. It's what he's calling as the Alt Asia countries, which is presenting the alternative to China. And why do they say that? He's explained this point in this paragraph, so I'm skipping this paragraph. I'm just explaining it from here so that you get the information and the knowledge. China has a total labor force of 950.4 million people. This is according to 2021 estimates. And Alt Asia has a 1.4 billion labor force, 1402 million labor force. So the labor force is much larger. Prime working age adults with tertiary education. So whenever you want to go to a new area, you want to know whether you'll get enough people working for you, and specifically people with education. So China has 145.1 million people like that. Alt Asian countries have 154.6. So we are beating, as an Alt Asia alternative, it's beating China here. And exports to, and most important, exports to the United States in Q4 2021 to Q3 2022. That means that year, China has $614 billion and Alt Asia already has $633 billion of exports. So taken together, I mean, no single country is able to compete with China, but Alt Asia just remember these countries again. You have a look at this: Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Philippines, Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Singapore, Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, Bangladesh, and of course India. So that's actually where Prime Minister Modi ji is coming from when he's talking about Make in India. Of course, the opposition makes a lot of noise, etc. about it. That's the job of the opposition. But if you actually look at it strategically, it's a very important point for a country like India to catch hold of this move. Because if you're looking at growing at 8%, 7%, 8% growth rates, and that's, if you can continue growing by that, the Indian economy is supposed to become the third largest economy in the world by 2050. That's going to happen. And it's almost predicted now. Economists have stopped doubting that it will become that. But if you can actually catch hold of this trend, that acceleration of this process is going to be much higher. Imagine the kind of jobs you'll get. Imagine the kind of careers people will make out of this. And 8%, I mean, ऐसे तो हम लोग 8% सुन के और 6% सुन के और 4% सुन के सिर्फ numbers सोचते हैं. But 4% will keep you under poverty. 8% will make you a rich nation. And if you can do 8% or 7-8% for 20-30 years, you actually move from, being a developing economy to actually a developed rich country. And that's where we are being steered to, and that's where we should steer ourselves to. So keep the politics aside. You have to understand that it's important for us to catch hold of this, because there are other competing nations where all this is going to go. It's not just India. But anyway, let's come back to what the article says. Alt-Asia has also become more economically integrated. All of it, bar India, Bangladesh and Taiwan, has helpfully signed on the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, which also includes China. So new information for you again. There is something called the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. India and Bangladesh and Taiwan have not signed it, but everybody else has signed it. And basically, when you're talking about a region and companies operating across national borders, you will want economic integration. You don't want to be caught up in the bureaucracy of moving goods and services from one place to the other. So that's why they are talking about the RCEP. So by harmonizing the rules of origin across the region's sundry existing trade deals, the pact has created a single market in intermediate products. That in turn has eased regulatory barriers to complex supply chains that run through multiple countries. So what has happened is because of this cooperation and because of this treaty, because of this partnership, regulatory barriers across countries have eased up. And most Alt-Asian countries are members of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, a newish American initiative. Brunei, Japan, Malaysia, Singapore and Vietnam belong to the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, which also includes Canada, Mexico and several South American countries. So this is basically, so what the emphasis of this paragraph is essentially to talk about the fact that these countries are aligning with each other, removing the trade barriers, removing the inefficiencies that happen because you're operating across borders, etc. So let's see how he goes ahead. A model for the Alt-Asian economy already exists, courtesy of Japanese countries which have been building supply chains in Southeast Asia for decades. More recently, Japan's rich Alt-Asian neighbor, South Korea, has followed its example. In 2020, South Korean firms' total stock of direct investments in Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand and Vietnam, which together with unstable Myanmar make up the Association of South Asian and Bangladesh, reached $96 billion. Now this is a long sentence, so you have to be able to break the sentence down to understand when you are looking at this. So what is he trying to say here? If you look back at this sentence, he's saying that a model for the Alt-Asian economy already exists. So what is that model? The model is Japanese companies which have been building supply chain across Southeast Asia for decades. And most recently, South Korea is also doing the same. So what is South Korea doing? Let's look at, that's where the paragraph is. Most recently, Japan's rich Alt Asian neighbor, South Korea. So let's focus on South Korea. The noun has changed from Japan to South Korea. South Korea follows its example. So what has it done? In 2020, South Korean firms' total stock of direct investments. So we are talking about a concept here, which is South Korean firms' total stock of direct investments. Now then, the countries you don't need to capture when you're reading for the first time or you're reading for comprehension. You don't need to capture this unless you're reading it for a GK paper. So basically from here to here, he's just talking about countries. So don't get lost in the countries. So you just say that, okay, the Asian countries, which include all those countries, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, you don't need to memorize this when you're reading the article. But what is the key point? The key point here, because if you start getting lost in those countries, you'll miss the key point. You have to read the key point this way. South Korean firms' total stock of direct investments reached $96 billion in 2020. Simple. It's as simple as that. If you get lost here, you'll keep getting lost more and more in what did he say? And that's the key. I've talked about this in the past lessons also, that when you have long sentence, देखो यहाँ sentence खत्म भी नहीं हो रहा है, ये sentence यहाँ पे जाके खत्म हुआ. So this sentence is almost like 4 sentences. कहाँ start हुआ? यहाँ पे start हुआ sentence in 2020 और यहाँ जाके खत्म हुआ. You can count the words. It will be, I'm quite sure, 50, 60, 70 words. But if you read the right the right elements of the sentence together, you will see that it becomes much easier for you to grasp, right? So the structure is very simple. In 2020, South Korean firm का क्या? Total stock of direct investment in these countries reached $96 billion. और वो क्या है? It's more than Korean investments in China. That means they are moving their, South Korean companies are moving their manufacturing base out of China, because in 2020 he's talking about this, he's giving this contrast because he's trying to tell you that they have gone above China. Their direct investments in other countries of the Alt Asian countries has gone above the Chinese number. As recently as a decade ago, the stock of Korean companies' investment in China was nearly as large as in Alt Asia. So what has happened was nearly twice as large as in Alt Asia. So पहले क्या था? चाइना में 2 होता था तो ऑल्ट एशिया में 1 था. अब क्या हो गया? चाइना में 2 है, ऑल्ट एशिया में 2+ है. That's what has happened. So that's what he's saying. Why he's giving this example? He's giving you this example to illustrate the fact that South Korean companies, I mean, he's giving this example, and the other illustration is doing, there's already a model that exists. Japanese companies are shifting, and he's giving this specific example to tell you that South Korean companies, which used to have 1:2 ratio of their investments and their manufacturing between Alt Asia and China, are now 2+2, which means they've got more more production hinging on Alt Asia than China, right? And then he says now more non-Alt Asian firms are eyeing the region. So when you're talking about South Korea, you're talking about Japan, they're already Alt Asian firms. They are countries who are part of the Alt Asian geography. But now he's saying that now more, I mean, ye last part, last year, Samsung is the biggest foreign investor in Vietnam. More examples here. So it's not changing the idea. So we move to the next paragraph for the idea. More non-Alt Asian firms are eyeing the region, often via their Taiwanese contract manufacturers. So there are more non-Alt Asian firms. That means firms from Europe, firms from America, firms from Africa, which are non-Alt Asian, which are not in the Alt Asian countries. They are now eyeing the region. And they are doing it through their Taiwanese contract manufacturers. Taiwan's Foxconn, Pegatron and Wistron, which assemble gadgets for Apple, among others, are investing heavily in Indian factories. यहाँ पे इंडिया की बात आई. The share of iPhones made in India is expected to rise from around 1 in 20 last year to perhaps 1 in 4 by 2025. So, important information for all of us, specifically if you're going for interviews, etc. You talk about, I mean, if somebody asks you, what is your opinion about Make in India? Please reference this article and use this information to actually present a much stronger perspective. Rather than just speaking like a 9th standard kid, you should be able to speak like an informed individual, a person who's going to become an administrator or a manager when you talk about this. So India's production of iPhones. So through these companies, Apple is moving its manufacturing to India, and from just 5%, we are going to go to 25% of Apple iPhones being produced in India. So obviously, you can imagine the growth that's going to happen. 2 Taiwanese universities have teamed up with Tata, an Indian conglomerate, with ambitious plans in high-tech manufacturing to offer courses in electronics to Indian workers. Google is shifting the outsource. So obviously, when you have manufacturing, when you've got companies going to come into the country to manufacture, they need people. So they need skilled people. So Tata के साथ Taiwanese universities ने have teamed up with plans to offer courses in electronics to Indian workers. Google is shifting the outsourced production of its newest Pixel smartphones from China to Vietnam. So he's talking, the key source, although we stopped a little bit on India here, the key information here in this paragraph is that it's not just alt Asian companies which are shifting, but also the non-alt Asian companies that are shifting. More sophisticated manufacturing, new paragraph, so new idea. More sophisticated manufacturing, especially of geopolitically fraught semiconductors, is also moving to alt Asia. So semiconductors, right? So we can actually skip this thing, because he's just talking about the movement of various things. So let's move into. He does bring out some caution before he ends the article. So we are in the last 3-4 paragraphs. So I'll go to the caution part. While all this is happening, let's see what are the challenges that alt Asia will face when it starts to outstrip China. So China's huge advantage has historically been its vast single market, knit together with decent infrastructure, where value could be added without suppliers, workers and capital crossing national borders. एक country के अंदर सब कुछ हो रहा था. For alt Asia to truly rival China, therefore, its supply chain will need to become far more integrated and efficient. Although RCEP has greased the wheels, that means it's eased cross-border problems of intra-alt Asian commerce somewhat, the flow of goods faces more obstacles than it does within China. Its member countries will need to play to their comparative advantage. So this is the first caution point he's put in. China's advantage of being a single country, offering everything, is still there, which alt Asian countries, although they are trying to collaborate with each other and they're trying to help each other out. And that's where India has a problem, because has an advantage, not a problem. India has an advantage because India has still got that large landmass, and I mean, if you look at the combined population of India and the working population, I think of the alt Asian economies will be more than half of it. So or maybe even more than that. So it actually presents us with a very unique opportunity to actually take the bull by the horns, so to say. So for now, the infrastructure that connects them is shabby at best. Finicky regulations and national ambitions can easily gum up the alternative supply chain. Alt Asia's poorer countries are also not necessarily keen on the logical division of labor, which would see them with a bigger role in the more menial parts of the electronic supply chain. And foregoing all Chinese-made parts is next to impossible. Thamlev, an American electric bike startup, moved production from China to Malaysia in 2022 in order to avoid a 25% American tariff, but still needed to import Chinese components. As a result, it took a month longer for its e-bikes to reach American riders. So he's giving an example that the caution उसने जो set किया है कि national borders के across goods का movement difficult है and people का भी movement difficult है, and the other factor he's saying that between Alt Asia also there are poorer countries and richer countries, and poorer countries have the suspicion again that हम लोग को सिर्फ menial काम दिया जाएगा, हमारे country में सिर्फ menial काम होगा और जो high end, high revenue, high growth काम होगा वो richer countries में होगा. So that's an issue, and when you start thinking nationalist within the region, then the advantage that you have over China starts breaking down. Prospects for deeper integration are hazy both within Alt Asia and with big consumer markets in the rich world. India, on whose 1.4 billion people Alt Asia's future may depend, seems in no rush to become part of RCEP. So India has not joined RCEP for whatever reasons. Although the country has, with other Alt Asian neighbors, signed up to America's India-Pacific framework, it has opted out of the initiative trade provision, and these anyway lack bite. America is in a protectionist mood and has offered no tariff cuts or better access to its vast market. One Asian policymaker likens it to a donut lacking substance in the middle. So what is this caution point? Deeper integration between these Alt Asian countries, a prospect hazy hai, both within Alt Asia and with big consumer markets in the rich world. That means Europe and America we are talking about. And India has not joined the RCEP. And although it's joined the India-Pacific framework, it's opted out of the initiative trade provision, maybe to protect its own markets or whatever the reason is. I have not gone deep into that part, so I cannot explain that part to you much. But that's something that you should know. And these anyway lack bite. What the initiative trade provision? What are these? What lacks bite? These क्या है? These is referring to the initiatives, the Indo-Pacific frameworks, trade provisions. So these lack bite, and it's like a donut. It's like a donut without substance in the middle. So that's the example. That's the analogy. Is this thing, and America is also acting protectionist of its market, of access to its market. So America is not allowing access to its market because, of course, they have their own political compulsions there. So these are challenges. So what is the conclusion? Alt Asia will certainly not replace China soon, let alone overnight. In January, for example, Panasonic announced a big expansion of its Chinese operations. But in time, China is likely to become less attractive to foreign manufacturers. Chinese labor is not getting any cheaper, and its graduates are not getting much more numerous. So China is also having a slowdown of population, which is happening across a lot of the countries. So that's what he's talking about here. America may yet realize that reducing its reliance on China in practice requires closer ties with friendly countries. What is it saying? Let me read this again. America may yet realize that reducing its reliance on China in practice requires closer ties with friendly countries. So it cannot be suspicious of China as well as friendly countries, all of them. So it's saying that if you want to decouple from China for America, the article is saying, the author is saying here, that they need to improve their ties with friendly countries, including membership of the CPTPP, the precursor of which collapsed after America pulled out in 2017. And as a budding alternative to China, Alt Asia has no equal. So very strong, very strong recommendation from the author, more or less, for America to actually, if you want to decouple from China, he's closing with that if you want to decouple from China, there's no alternative to Alt Asia for them, and they have to start getting their trade acts with these countries, which are more friendly to them than China, online. And America has been protective, has not been opening its markets, etc., to these countries, but it need to do that. It need to improve trade with these countries if it really wants to reduce or remove its dependence from China. So key learnings for you. Please connect this article to the Make in India program, why it's so important, why it is not just as a lot of people say, why it's not just a jumla that people talk about. It is actually the theme, it's actually the base to the growth we are going to see in this country for the next 3 decades if we can do it successfully. And that's what you need to have. So do let me know if you got better informed about what's happening in the world with this article. And I hope you are improving your comprehension, your reading ability with me here. So this is Arun Sharma signing off. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. I'll be back soon with the next one.